Hello, figments of my imagination. Week 1 of the Ashes Alpha just wrapped, and since I'm heading out of town soon, I figured I would just do a quick video of my impressions on the alpha as a whole. Let's start with the good. For an alpha, the game is actually really light on bugs. Yes, they exist, and I'll talk about them in a bit, but for this early on, I'm impressed. The characters feel pretty good, if a bit stiff. Dodging seems to have some issues, but that may be lag or other factors. Early gameplay is never a good indicator of what's to come, so I'm reserving harsher judgment on this one for now. The weapons feel good. Basic attacks are meaningful and feel impactful. Having a button to spam probably helps that. You also gain full XP for both equipped weapons, a very nice quality of life feature in a genre that already has plenty of grinding. No need to make it more painful. Early and open access to movement is also a big plus. Sprinting is a noticeable movement increase, and stamina recharges pretty quickly. Plus, you get a mount from one of the first quests. Early movement options like this are essential in a game with such a huge map and no teleportation, so it's nice to see them. Finally, the response time and openness from the team has been phenomenal. I already expected this based on the passion I've seen from the team over the past 3 years, but it's great to see it in practice. Hopefully this sort of transparency continues all the way through launch. Moving on to the bad. First, having different rarity tiers on gatherables with the limited inventory space for them feels pretty bad, at least early. I assume later on the higher rarity logs will matter, but at low levels it just means another stack I have to manage, and probably throw out, as I'd rather return with 20 logs instead of 2 green quality logs. Staying with gathering, the proliferation of novice gatherables is just not there for such an early zone. I personally spent hours searching every rock trying to find copper, with no luck. Finding basalt and granite to try to level up mining enough to actually get a certificate seemed impossible as well. One theory being passed around was that any mined rock is randomly replaced with one from any tier, meaning eventually every rock would be tier 2 or 3 as no one could mine them. Not sure how true that is, but they really need to fix it if they want people to actually test that system. Speaking of odd spawns, mob levels seem to be almost random in some places. I found multiple areas with level 2 or 3 mobs, then I crossed some sort of invisible line and was suddenly murdered by a level 9 mob. Not a unique occurrence in the MMO space, but it did happen in quite a few spots, which is pretty annoying in a game that has real consequences for death. Starting weapons are also a minor annoyance of mine. Two-handed weapons are inherently more powerful than one-handed weapons without some sort of offhand, but for some reason they start characters like the mage with just a wand and no offhand. Luckily, they do have a wide variety of weapons hidden in the starting area, but I'm sure a lot of people miss them, especially with the devs' insistence that we leave the starting area as quickly as possible. Along the same vein, you should always have 2 weapons equipped, since they seem to get the stats from the other weapon as well. Not sure why they don't just start each character with 2 weapons, but for now, if you're playing in any of the coming weekends, make sure to pick up a weapon for your off slot from the crates in the starting area. Resting recovery should be higher, at least at the early levels. I understand they're going for a slower paced MMO, and that's fine, I respect that, but having to eat multiple times between each mob and low level content feels horrible. It's like you're punished for not playing a healer. You can slash sit to recover, but the amount is incredibly low and doesn't improve much with level. Personally, I think this is what they should buff. Just up the flat value on sitting, so early game you only have to sit for a few seconds before you're good to go. Later on, say level 10 plus, the recovery should be worse, so you have to eat if you want to keep going. That way, combat still has consequences, but you aren't spending more time sitting than actually playing. And the worst thing about the whole weekend? The DDoS attack that completely shut down Sunday testing. This one is obviously not the team's fault. Plenty of game companies have dealt with these kinds of attacks before, especially when they have a big release or a lot of eyes on their product. It sucks, but I'm glad things like this are happening now. Hopefully the team will be better prepared in the coming months and for main release. Now the bugs. I mentioned early on that the bugs weren't that bad, and honestly, they weren't. Frankly, I've had similar level of bugginess in, quote, finished products. You had your usual suspects, NPCs disappearing, T-posing, sinking through the terrain, or floating above it. Sound balancing had some issues, specifically with trees falling. I was surprised by how infrequently I experienced rubber banding. Now, the game did just randomly boot me a few times, but checking in-game or Discord showed that it happened to everyone at the same time, so that was likely a server issue more than a game crash. I did personally find one critical bug. When attempting to sell glint at the Winstead Hunting Lodge, all of my money was instantly wiped out. And he took the glint. Pretty soul-crushing after spending hours cutting down and selling trees, but what can you do other than put in a ticket and roll another character? Overall, I had a great time. I tried out Bard, Cleric, Mage, and Fighter briefly. I would have hit Tank and Ranger on Sunday, but obviously the DDoSer had different plans. I personally feel like healers just feel better to play, partly because of what I mentioned earlier with all the time spent resting or cramming rations down your face. Bard in particular felt really good. You get access to some strong damage abilities early, and your healing is respectable. And that's it. Like I said at the start, I'm heading out of town for the rest of the week, which means I'll miss the second weekend, but I'll be back in time to join the third weekend with all of the late key buyers. Also of note, Brighter Shores is set to release November 6th, so next week is going to be packed. Do YouTube stuff below, or don't, and I'll see you all eventually.